Resourceful Designer, episode 198, the less glamorous side of working from home.
Welcome to the Resourceful Designer podcast, offering solutions to streamline your graphic and web design business so you can get back to designing. And now, your host. He noticed his first gray hair the day after his son was born, Mark Decote.
Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for tuning in. In this episode, I'm going to expose the other side of working from home, the side that may prevent some people from wanting to do it. I'm also going to share a resource for creating a unique effect for your designs. So what have I been up to? Well, this past week, things have been getting back to normal after the holiday season. I completed several podcast artworks, all the orders that came in over the holidays that I hadn't done, so I got them done this week. I also completed 2 website projects and made some good headway on another one. I also spent a little bit of time cleaning up my fonts folder. There was a few fonts that I had added and I didn't have them in the right directories. I use Suitcase Fusion to organize my fonts, and I have different folders for different things, like for scripts, and I divide my scripts into like calligraphic or handwritten and different things. And there's a few fonts that were not in the right categories or that I needed to add them to different categories. So I spent a little bit of time doing that. Not a whole lot of time. There's still some more to do, but a little bit. I also made sure to go over all my clients' websites and update the copyright notice at the bottom of the site in the footer. Make sure that they all said 2020. Now, most of them were set to do it automatically, but I did have a few I had to go update on my own. And I started planning for my presentation at PodFest this March. I've been asked to give a presentation on podcast artwork at the podcast conference in Florida that I'll be attending. So I started just kind of roughly laying out the groundworks of what I want to talk about in what order and that sort of things before fleshing out what the speech is going to be. And then, of course, I'll have to get down and make the slides for it. So that's a little bit of what I've been up to this week. Now, I'd like to take a bit of time and share with you the first resource of the week for 2020. And this resource is Vector Raster, and it's by a company called Lost Minds. And you can find their website at lostminds.com. Now, Vector Raster is for Mac OS and iOS only. I'm sorry, Windows people. It's another one of those, but what can I do? I'm a Mac person, and that tends to be the things I find. But Vector Raster is a graphic utility for creating vector-based raster patterns and halftones based on images and gradients. That's straight from their site. But what it does is it creates halftones with different point shapes, including circles, polygons, and even font characters. You can create halftones using fonts. You can even import your own custom vector shapes to use in your halftones and your patterns. Now, when I say halftones, it's the traditional dot halftone where you can replace the dots with different shapes, but you can also create the circle halftones or straight line halftones, so where it's a line and the line will get thicker and thinner to create the image of the halftone. With this program, you have full control over the size of the points, the spacing between the points, the distribution pattern of the points, and so much more. And then once you're happy with the halftone that you've created, then you could export it as a vector in EPS and PDF format, or you can save it as a JPEG, PNG, or TIFF file. Now, my explanation really doesn't do this program justice. This is something I've had this on my computer for a very, very long time. And actually, to be honest, I'd forgotten all about it until I got an upgrade email saying that a new version had come out. And then I went, oh yeah, it's been a while since I've used this. So this is one of those programs that, well, in fact, I could have included this on my One Trick Pony episode back in episode 194. Because that's exactly what this is. It does one thing. It creates halftone images or patterns. And then you take those patterns or those halftones and you import them into whatever you're going to do. So if you ever wanted to create some sort of halftone gradient to use in a background, you know, some of those cartoonish style designs where the background gradient, it'll be like a solid red, but then there'll be black dots that go in a gradient to kind of create the effect. Or if you're trying to create one of those print effects where you have a photo and you want it to actually be a halftone. These days, with the way things are printed, no longer do we see halftone dots anymore. Well, maybe you want to purposely do that. You can use this program to do it. The other thing is, have you ever seen one of those photos that's actually made up of text? So it's kind of like a halftone dot, but instead of dots, it's actually letters. So you can have a paragraph of written text, but each letter is slightly different in thickness and in size and that, so that it creates a halftone effect. So when you could read the paragraph, but when you stand back and you look at it, you can actually see a photo. And it's usually a person or something. Well, that sort of effect can be created with vector raster. As I said, I've had this in my toolbox for years, and although it's not one I use very often, I can say that whenever I do need it, it's one of those programs that saves me a ton of time. Because if you've ever tried creating a halftone effect in Illustrator or any other program, it can be very difficult to do it, especially if you have to adjust it, where with this program, it's so easy to adjust and get it right the first time. And if it's not right the first time, it's easy to fix it and get it right the second time. So that's why I chose this as the resource of the week. Now, if you're interested, once again, the website is lostminds.com. And now, the less glamorous side of working from home. Designers fall into 3 categories: those who work from home, those who don't but long for the ability to work from home, and those who don't want to work from home because, well, they don't realize just how great working from home can be. Okay, maybe that's a bit of an exaggeration. Even though working from home is great, I do admit it's not for everyone. Now, in past episodes, I've shared numerous great reasons for working from home, but I always cautioned you to examine your own lifestyle before taking the entrepreneurial plunge and to make sure that this life is actually for you. If you're an introvert or someone who likes to do things at your own pace, then the idea of working alone without anyone looking over your shoulder sounds wonderful. And it is. Plus, of course, there's all the benefits of working from home. There's no commute. You get to set your own hours. There's more freedom and flexibility to choose the work that you want to work on. And the list goes on and on. And that's why, as we start this new decade of 2020, more and more people in all professions, designers included, are opting to work for themselves by starting a home-based business. But what many of these people fail to realize, as I stated earlier, is that working from home is not for everyone. And it's possible that you may fall into that category. You see, even though working from home has plenty of perks, there's also a downside to it as well that I don't really touch on very often on this podcast. For one thing, you may be the type of person who'll get bored being by yourself all day, every day, week after week, month after month. Myself, I don't feel that way. There have been entire weeks where I haven't seen another human being other than a member of my family. And that may seem fine at first to you, but will you be okay as time goes by and your life becomes more and more monotonous in that aspect? Anyone who works from home will tell you that inevitably your work-life balance will be affected. Unless you have a very strict structure in place, the freedom that working from home gives you could cause you to falter and actually become lazy. If you don't set guidelines for yourself, you'll start putting things off and procrastination will become a real problem. And before you know it, all your good intentions go out the window and you become someone who's more interested in binging the newest Netflix series than working on that important website for your client. And why not? There's nobody there to stop you from doing it. Being alone without anyone to hold you accountable can lead to your business downfall. When you're alone, it becomes easy to lose track of time, to forget to stop and eat meals. It can cause you to even neglect your health. I know, I've been there. There have been days when my wife walks in at the end of the day asking about supper, and I realize that I never even stopped to have lunch. I remember seeing the school bus pull up at 3 p.m. to drop my kids off, and me sprinting from my computer to the bedroom to get dressed because I was still in my bathrobe. And I can't tell you how many times over the years my wife has asked me if I was planning on shaving anytime soon because I hadn't bothered for a few days. I mean, why should I? I wasn't leaving the house. Nobody was seeing me. Why should I shave? When you work from home, things that people with normal 9-to-5 jobs would never think of doing suddenly become the norm for you. Of course, to some people, this sounds great, but to others, this is self-neglect. And self-neglect, once started, can grow and become a problem. And then, of course, there's the whole feeling of isolation. When you work in an office environment, you get to interact with your fellow coworkers. You talk about your families, you talk about your vacations, you discuss the latest sports scores or the television shows you've watched, and of course, there's all the office gossip. But when you work from home, there's none of that. And talking to your family members is definitely not the same as interacting with other people. And even the most introverted of individuals needs that interaction with other people. Now, I did an entire episode a while back on dealing with isolation, so I'm not going to go over all those details again. You can have a listen to that one at resourcefuldesigner.com/episode 105. But what I want to say is that, unlike the rest of the world, people who work from home need to consciously put in an effort and actually schedule time to interact with other human beings. It sounds crazy, but we have to actually think about interacting with people. When your family members get home at the end of the long day, whether it's work or school or whatever, they may want nothing more than to curl up on the couch and watch TV. And that's great. They deserve it. But you've been alone all day. So you don't need to unwind like they do. In fact, it could be the contrary. Maybe you actually want to get out of the house and they don't. That's one of the reasons that I do the groceries for our household. I've always done it. At the end of a busy day, my wife has no desire to go out shopping. Me, on the other hand, I want to get out of the house. I've been alone all day, cooped up. I love going to the grocery store. Even if the only person I talk to there is the cashier, I'm still out among people, and it helps alleviate that feeling of isolation. A study done by the University of Iowa that I found says that on average, an office worker has a face-to-face interaction, meaning a conversation that lasts more than just a few words, with 20 to 28 people per day. And that's not counting family members. So the average office worker interacts with 20 to 28 people per day. For a remote worker, and a home-based business falls into the category of remote worker, that number drops astoundingly to 0.8 interactions per day. Now, 0.8, I did the math on that. That translates to 71 days per year that a remote worker does not interact with another human being. Now, of course, this is not taking family into account, but 71 days out of the year where you don't interact with another human being. Now, for some people, that lack of interaction can affect their mental health and lead to loneliness and possibly even depression, which, if not caught early, can spiral out of control. Because people suffering from depression rarely want to interact with others. And you can see what the problem is there. A lack of interaction can lead to depression, and depression can make people isolate themselves from others, resulting in a lack of interaction. Now, sure, some of this can be alleviated by interacting with people on social media or in groups like the Resourceful Designer Facebook group, or even better, the Resourceful Designer community, which you can join at resourcefuldesigner.com/community. But interacting online is never the same as interacting with someone face to face. Now, I know that this is a very somber episode compared to most, but I don't want to hide the fact that there is a less glamorous side to working from home that people don't often talk about. But what can you do if you start to feel any of what I've been talking about? Well, the first thing you need to do is consider whether or not working from home is for you. Some people just thrive better in a social environment, and there's nothing wrong with that. Maybe you gave it a go and you decided that working from home is not for you. That's okay. Use the experience that you gained working for yourself to help you in your next position, wherever that may be. But if you are determined to give working from home a go, here are a few steps that you can take that may help. 1, consider working from a co-working space. If you don't like being alone all the time, a co-working space is a great option to run your own business while still around people. Or work from the library or even a coffee shop. Even if you don't talk with people around you, simply being around others will improve your mental state. The other thing to do is set a schedule and stick to it. Most people out in the workforce do let's just say 9 to 5 for lack of a better time, but most people do say a 9 to 5 job. Why don't you do the same thing? Yes, working from home means you can set whatever hours you want, but that can lead to problems. If you set fixed office hours for yourself, then you know when you should and when you shouldn't be working. When I started my business, one of the first things I told my wife is I was leaving a 9-to-5 job. I was going to have a 9-to-5 job at home. So when she left for work, I was at work, and when she got home, I was done. And 15 years later, I still run it the exact same way. Now, sure, there are times where I might do an hour here or there on the weekend or an evening when really needed. But for the most part, I finish working at 5 o'clock. And my evenings are spent with my wife, and when the kids were still at home, spent with the family, or going out, interacting with friends. I make sure I have the time for a social life. And you should do the same thing. Just because you can work all hours of the day doesn't mean you should. The other thing is plan your day. Setting up daily tasks to work on is a great way to stay productive, and it wards off procrastination by starting your day knowing what you need to accomplish. This is what keeps me going. Every morning I sit down and I have a list of all the things I need to accomplish that day. I either write it up first thing in the morning, or sometimes I'll write it up before going to bed so that I know when I get up exactly what I have to do. And I've been doing this for years and years and years, and it helps me get through my day because I know what I have to do, and I can tell at the end of the day whether I've been productive or not. Now, if you want to know more about this tactic, listen to episode 66 of the podcast, which is Tackle Your To-Do List with Tasks and Projects. The next thing you can do is schedule networking events. Find out what's happening around your community, in your area. Municipalities, Chamber of Commerce's, business organizations, everybody is putting on some sort of event. Make a point of going to them. Even if they don't lead to any work, just being out amongst the people there will help contribute to your mental health. And you never know when you might pick up a job. So try to attend as many of these things as you can. And if you do start feeling isolated and lonely, reach out to people. Join a community like I mentioned earlier. A live one would be best, but even an online community like the Resourceful Designer community can help alleviate some senses of isolation. And if you do start feeling depressed, please seek help. Depression is no small matter, and if left unacknowledged, can lead to some pretty dark places. So if you do think you're going down that path, please seek professional help. Now, I'm sorry this was such a bleak episode, but this is part of the reality of working from home. And unfortunately, it's not for everyone. However, if you are ready to face the challenge and you are able to overcome and persevere through this less glamorous side of it, as I put it, the rewards are numerous. And as many home-based designers that I know will tell you, myself included, I have never regretted my decision to leave my job and work from home. And I will never go back to a regular office job. Working from home is the life I chose, and if you're the right person for it, it can be the best thing to happen to you as well. Now, I would love to know, what quote-unquote less glamorous side of working from home have you experienced? Is there anything you had to overcome, or anything that got the better of you? Please leave me a comment for this episode at resourcefuldesigner.com/episode 198. So that's it for this episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. Now, I know these last few episodes have been much shorter than normal. I would love to hear from you. What do you think of this shorter format? Do you like it, or do you prefer it when I go into the longer, more detailed discussions? Let me know. Send me a message at feedback@resourcefuldesigner.com. I'd love to hear from you. But that's it for me this week. I've got a few more jobs to do today, and then I'm going to head out and interact with people. And you should too. Until next time, I am Mark Decote, wishing you all the best with your graphic design business. And as always, reminding you to stay creative.
Thanks for listening to the Resourceful Designer podcast at resourcefuldesigner.com.